Hey, I'm Ken Andrews, and welcome to episode 3, all about layering guitars. So why would you want to layer guitars in the first place? I mean, in my case, my band Failure is a trio, drums, bass, guitar. That's how we play live. But on recordings, we love to experiment with additional tracks of guitar to emphasize a particular part, or maybe make the rhythm guitars have a more interesting texture, or sometimes to simply create some sonic chaos in a bridge of a song. Often the funnest part of constructing a Failure recording for me is layering guitars. It's just so much fun to search for different combinations of instruments, effects, amps, etc. to come up with an interesting tone that fits the part you're working on. Let me just take a second to say thank you to everyone who has commented on the videos and subscribed to the channel so far. Honestly, I wasn't totally sure if anyone would be interested in this stuff, but clearly you guys are, and that has really inspired me to continue. I read the comments, and while reading them, I've been making lists of potential subjects for future episodes. But a specific comment about the Failure song, Apocalypse Blooms, by Grant Collins, thank you, Grant, caught my eye, and so that's why I'm doing this episode on layering guitars, using the Failure song Apocalypse Blooms to demonstrate. But before we dive into the nitty-gritty, I'd like to talk about the song itself for a minute. When Greg Edwards and I sit down to work on music, it's often the case that one of us has an idea that they'd like to pursue. Sometimes it's just a riff, and sometimes it could be a whole song. But the way we work together is that whoever has this initial idea, well, they get to sit in the songwriting driver's seat, as it were, and the other person basically takes over as the editor or producer of the song. I'm pretty certain Greg actually played most, if not all, the guitars on this song, and my role, again, was more of a recording engineer, facilitator, guitar sound tweaker. That's one thing that Greg and I have been doing for a long time, is while one of us is playing a part, the other one is tweaking the sound. Greg and I have gotten now to the point in our creative relationship where we kind of know when to interject ideas, but we also know when to take a half step back and just kind of support the other person, execute their vision for the song. I'm pretty sure we both realized early on that this song would really benefit from multiple layers of guitars to deepen the texture of the chords and create that dreamy, swirling guitar world. Okay, let's dive into the guitars. The very first strum is an electric guitar. And then this acoustic on the right starts fading in here. Here's the one on the left, and then the electric comes back. And you can hear that this acoustic is actually not playing the chords, it's just droning. It's really the same amount of guitar tracks. I just took the electric here and popped it down onto its own track. That's what I generally do with all instruments, especially if there's a lot of overdubbed guitars. So you can see there's a snare happening, right? Like a reverse snare. That's how I like to mix things, because for one, it shows me where things play. I've got the song arrangement up here on this line, the markers line. Now I could do everything that I'm doing in terms of treating it differently, just using automation on the same track, but it's much faster to just bust it out onto its own tracks. This way you can just work without having to engage automation so much, or at all sometimes. I prefer that because then at any point I can quickly make a global change. Now I can do different things like pan them a little bit differently, maybe a little wider in the chorus, a little bit brighter, more ambience, some kind of just nice change and impactful change for the downbeat of the chorus without having to actually add more instruments. Okay, and so in the chorus here we've got just two kind of overdriven rhythm guitars, kind of dark, but letting them hold the sort of bottom of the chord. So like a melodic guitar playing high octaves with a high octave effect on the guitar itself as well. And the only thing I'm doing here is just some EQing, some brightening, lopping off the bottom, and then adding some delay and some plate. In this case, it would be the Sound Toys Echo Boy and the UAD EMT 140 plate. The other thing I want to point out is there's a keyboard almost throughout the song. It's a Solina synth strings. It's just playing some single notes, following the chord changes. You don't really hear it once an electric is in. It almost sounds like a delay effect or something that's on the guitar, and that's kind of how I wanted it to appear. I didn't want you to really hear it as a separate instrument. It's just to kind of make the guitars sound a little dreamier. So a pair of acoustics and a pair of overdriven electrics, all playing basically the same part. Throughout this song, you'll hear some subtle rhythmic discrepancies or, things that aren't perfectly in time. That's what actually helps create size and depth when you're layering a lot of guitars. If everything's perfectly played, it can almost sound mono-ish. Okay, let's take a look at the outro, which is a bit of a change in the song. Definitely letting the acoustics drive a little bit more in this section because they have a lot of intensity to them and they have that kind of brighter attack on the very top. Same part, but a lot more saturation on this guy for sure. Sometimes the acoustics are a little flammy with the drums. With Pro Tools, obviously, you can go in and correct, but I like leaving some of that stuff in. I think it just gives a little bit of humanity to the whole vibe. All right, so that is one example of layering guitars. I'm constantly experimenting with layering guitars, keyboards, vocals. I mean, there's no right or wrong way with this stuff. It really just comes down to experimenting with different sounds until you hear something that grabs you. Experiment, have fun, try things you think might not work, because sometimes they do. Once again, thanks for tuning in to the channel, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. Later.